In this video, I'm going to go over how to create 3D shapes, and so how to manipulate 3D space in After Effects. And here I have an example where these are all 2D layers that were created in Illustrator. And so here you see this one is this spirally thing, and this one is an archway. And I've brought them and positioned them in 3D space inside After Effects to help create and sell this idea of 3D movement. And this was done with a 3D camera as well. So the first thing we're gonna do is set up our space and then move through it with the camera. So to start out, I'm gonna delete out all of my stuff here. Just do delete. And I'm just left with this solid in the background. And I'm just gonna save this as an extra file. And so here I have my archway and I have this warp thing, which you can't see because it's black, but I'm gonna bring them in. So I'm going to bring in this one arch, and let's go back to one view. When we're working in 3D, it's helpful to be in either two views here, or let's bring this down so you can see how they're positioned, but we'll come back to that in 1 minute. And so if I want, to create this idea of like moving through these archways, I need a couple of them. So let's do one, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and let's give it a different color by going to layer styles and color overlay. And if I just change the color overlay and let's just do subtract, we'll get something slightly different. Duplicate this again. And on this one, if I change the color on this, we'll get one that's also slightly different. And so here, if we look at these, this is the top one that has the original. This is our second one, and this is our third one. So I'm just altering them very slightly, and let's rename them. So I'm gonna hit enter. This is gonna be arch 1, and I'm gonna go up, and enter, arch 2, arch 3. And so now I need to position these in 3D space. And in order to do that, I have to turn them into 3D layers. And the way you do that is with these boxes on the side. So let's just hide the top two. And when I turn it on, you'll see that nothing's changed, right? But this has actually become a 3D object. And when I click on it, you get this little widget. Now what's helpful is if I turn my two views on, so I'm clicking on one view and now I've got two views. And now this is showing me the top-down position of my objects in 3D space. And so here, when I now do this with arch 2, we'll see that they're directly stacked on top of each other. So in order to create a little bit of space, let's select arch 1 and move it forward in Z space. And you'll see that arch 2, even though it's in front, it's closest to where technically we are in space. Because arch 2 is positioned on top, it's going to show it in front. So if I change the layer order, then we'll see that now arch 1 is still on top. And I'm going to do the same thing with arch 3, and let's put it behind everything and turn on the position for it. Let's select it up, make it visible, and push it back a little bit more in space. And so now I've got all of these, and you can see how they're sort of stacked inside here now. When an object or color is not converted into 3D space, it will just stay static on the screen. So even though we're not seeing this shape here, it's still just taking up over everything. Let's just reposition this slightly. If you wanted to rotate these, you would go to R, or if you zoom in and look at the widget, you can drag in between, and now we're going to get this moving to the left or the right if we're going in the Y axis, or I can have it come in the X. And if you want to change where it rotates from, same principle as as changing the anchor point. And the way to do that is to go to the anchor point tool. So you click and hold on this little one up the top, and you go to pan camera point of interest tool, or you can also go to arch 1 and go to transform and anchor point. I'd recommend changing the anchor point before you start doing the 3D transforms. It just makes it a little bit easier. But if I move this down, move this up in 3D space, now I can have that come from the bottom. And then I need to reposition this by bringing this back down. But now when I rotate it, So for example, on the X, now it's going to come down and up. So if I want these to like animate and fold up, that'd be one thing we could do. And that might be something that's cool, at least for this first one. So now that we've got our objects set up in 3D space, let's make a camera to move through these. And let's come back here, click out, go back to my arrow tool, zoom out using the either minus or plus. And I'm gonna reposition these just slightly. Just like that. And I think my rotation is, yeah, let's get this back to 0. Cool. So now to create a camera, I'm going to right click and go new and camera. And depending on what your background is of working with cameras, that information will transfer. Or there's a really great YouTube video from Motion Science on all of these properties that are here. But I'm going to just stick with a basic camera, just a 1-node camera, which means it just looks out. There's not a point of interest. We can always change this later on, and I'll show an example of that. And I'm going to uncheck depth of field to begin with. And I'm going to say OK. And you'll see it has created a camera. And that is now our active camera. It is automatically taken over. So when I pan through the space, you'll see that this camera is passing through all of our shapes here. So this is nice because what I can do is I can do P for position, move forward, to 4 seconds, and move this through. If I press spacebar, we'll see that we're moving through all of those the entire space. And so this sets up some nice precedent for us, right? Like if I wanted to animate this one so it pops up as we're passing through it, I can animate the X rotation. Maybe I want to start with it totally down. Let's do -90. And it will then pop up to 0. So it'll slowly rise up, and we could offset this or slow this down just slightly so we see that a little bit more closely. So now as it's going, we've got some animation moving along with it. You can also do things like rotate or turn the entire rotation of the camera. You're not limited to just having the camera, set on a sort of static form. You can make it weird. So if I wanted that rotation of my camera, let's see, not that way, not that way. Let's do it on the Z, right? If I want this to spin as it's going through, as if it's looking up, I'm going to come back to the beginning, hit my Z rotation, press U to be able to see both. And let's just get this to go like 90 degrees. So we're going to get this sort of twist as we're moving through. Maybe that's a little bit too dizzying for folks, but maybe it's cool. I don't know. Then maybe I want all of these to be duplicated and then set back a little bit more. So we get a longer sort of chain happening. And I'm pressing the middle mouse button to be able to click and drag, or you can hold down spacebar and use the hand tool to move around. If you want to see these from the side, just change it on where it says top and go to the left view, and that'll show us the side panel here as well. So now as this rotates through, now we've gotten something a little bit more, because there's actually something we can see, there's a little bit more reference. So now we're coming in through here, right? But what if I wanted to add some lights? That's something you can do to help, create a sense of shadow or create a sense of light. So you can do that by right-clicking, go to New, and go to Light. And that's where I can go to, instead of Spot, I'm going to do Point, and that's just going to create one bright element of light. And you'll see now all of these objects have a sense of light. If I move this further away, if I move it through the scene, right, you'll see that some elements get darker as they pass between. So you could even just do this without having a camera. You can just animate a light in the scene. What I could also do is change the color of it. And a couple other things is when you create a three-dimensional object, you'll see you have some material options. So if you want it to cast shadows, you have to turn that physically on. So I'm going to do that with all of these. Drop them down, drop down material options, and then turn that on for all of them. And now, because I selected all of them, they'll have that same thing. So then if I take this light and if I double click on the point light, I'll get back into those settings. I could change the color of it if I wanted. I could change the intensity. And I could even attach it to my camera. So now as this moves through, so let's start with it here, and let's attach that position to my camera. So as my camera moves through, we'll see that light actively change, and we're seeing those shadows also fall off. It'll take a second to render just because it is a little bit resource intensive. Let's jump this down to a quarter. Also, I have OBS running, so that's taking up some RAM from this. So now you've got something that has shadows, you've got something that has a little bit of a light source. You could also add in another light, but say for example, you wanted a little bit of blur, you wanted some zoom. One thing you can do is if you then go in and double click on the camera, go to two node camera, and now I've got this little node, right? And if I enable focus distance, now this is going to be where everything is focused. What I can then do is pull this back, have this meet my area here. So this is going to be my point of interest. And then layer, camera, and link focus distance to point of interest. So whenever this reaches my point, we're going to see here that things are going to be in focus. Now if I turn this up to full, we'll see that as this moves forward, so here it's going to be like this one here is going to be in focus and everything behind it is going to be a little bit blurred. But we might have to increase the amount of blur by going into the camera options and increasing the blur level. And this will increase the blur for everything behind it. And that's a little bit better. I recommend keeping this as fast rectangle, but now we've just got, here we go. We can see it's a lot, right? It's blurry when it's out of focus because it's right here. So now as we do it, everything comes into a little bit more focus as it is reaching that point of interest. So this just makes it feel a little bit more like like an actual camera inside your scene. Now we've zoomed out way too far. Let's cut it back to the beginning. And so now that's kind of interesting because we haven't added any actual blur effects. It's all doing that inside the camera. And it's way blurring out because of the amount that this is blurred. So maybe turn this back down to 100 and let's see what that looks like if we're out here. So you can adjust this, you can play around with this. This is just adjusting the blur level. There's a lot more settings you can have in here, but this is a start to think about in terms of, you know, moving around 3D objects, having a camera move through them. There's a lot you can do.